Go ahead, Steppenwolf.
Well, there is some kind of reward. I don't know how it actually is implemented, but we do get armor from playing PvP. Even if it may not be the best armor, but once you have probably reached a certain level in War Plus, you will have a very, very decent armor to go into PvE. The same way round, the raid boss is something very decent to have, but I guess it won't be a must-be. You have to have this raid boss to actually be able to take the enemy base or defend your own. So I think with that in place, players who really enjoy PvP just can go in there, play without a raid boss, and just get good armor, then do the raid themselves, because they are 40 players probably, so they have a group set up for that, and then just come back. On the other side, if you are a PvE group, you do have your good PvE gear, you get that raid pass because you are raiding or are part of a progression raid, and then you say, okay, let's do a war plot, and you have that neat feature. So it combines both areas of the game together and bonds it together. You don't have that, oh, they are doing PvP, you have to have PvP gear for that to actually participate, because it's just way better than the PvE gear, and the other way around. You benefit from doing both.
I'm going to step in here, state that this will be part of the last part of our discussion for PvP. It is worth noting that while Carbine has stated that there is going to be a distinction and a difference between PvP and PvE gear, and it is going to have something like a 80% variance in, I would say, usability, depending upon which one you have, etc. And this particular topic will be the final thing that we will discuss when it comes to PvP, which is the itemization.
Can I just quickly come back to the question Ms. raised, but we didn't answer? Ms. raised the point about how, for an MMO, Wildstar is starting to intertwine PvE and PvP. It actually means that PvE will contribute to the PvP aspects of the game directly through the raid bosses. And then he raised that very interesting question about, okay, that's what PvE is going to contribute to the PvP side, but what will the PvP aspect contribute in reverse to the PvEers? What rewards could the PvEers get from PvP that would give them an advantage in the PvE environment, such as the advantage that the PvE players given the PvP play an advantage via the war bosses? And that's a good one. I don't know how to answer it. But I think it's something that would be interesting
I'd
to
like to
discuss.
throw one thing in as well. Apologies, Hammerless, in that someone suggested that the armor would do so. There's separation there, but it could well be. You've got 80 people in a guild, 30 of which do PvE, 30 of which just do PvP, and 10 that do both. So the benefit needs to be able to translate across different players.
I was just thinking maybe if you win a war plot, you would gain a buff for PvE, something like that. I don't know.
That's a good idea. I like that. A bit like fortresses in Iron. You win a fortress in PvP and it contributes sort of like 5% XP gain or something, or increased health regen.
It's a tricky one, because I could see an item being awarded in a war plot that you take back to the guild bank and the raiders take it out and they use it, but then how do you balance those items so as not to either A, trivialize, or B, more worryingly, be required for progression raid content?
No, I don't think you should use gear. If they have made separated gear, it need to be separate. I'm not so much fond of separation of gear in general. I prefer that you can use the same gear for all activities. But if it's the route they have taken, it should not be mixed then.
I just read the set, and the dist again had a very good point, which is not only implemented in Dark Age of Camelot, but as well in Aeon, so that once you win a war plot or something, it may not be as open world as in those games, but you may be able to unlock dungeons, like in Aeon, for example. If you hold a castle for a while and you actually win the battle over it, and there is a dungeon attached to it, you might be able to enter that just as the Dominion side of types and not as the Exile side of types until it's rolled out, I don't know, 4 to 6 hours later.
That will be
Hmm.
cool, actually. You can gain a key or something to open the super secret dungeon. You had that in 2 past the expansion of World of Warcraft, Watch of the Lich King Cataclysm. If you were winning the war zone area, the new faction had access to the boss, etc. It was not a boss with amazing loot, but it was still something cool to do.
But if it would be an important dungeon, it would restrict certain groups from entering the dungeon, though.
That might
As
not
it-
be a bad thing. That's consequence for your entire faction's performance.
Yeah, but you would have to do war plots for certain then.
Yeah, but it can just be a bonus. You know, you will have so many things that are open through paths and stuff like that, which are bonus stage. They might not offer you something special, but it could be in a little bit in the way of World of Warcraft making it. You win your war plot, or you win 10 war plot or 50 war plot, whatever, you got your super key. It's just linked to your own guild and then or to your own group, and then you open the super dungeon and you have a boss, but it's a boss maybe not better than a red boss, just a boss like I don't know, a elder dungeon boss or something like that, which drop PvP and PvE gear or something like that.
Hmm. Or you get like a version from a dungeon that's like there's already a version of that dungeon out there, but if you win a certain amount of war plots, that you can enter a dungeon that's like a version but a little harder, that you get a little bit better gear.
Yeah, or just a special boss, or you gain more item for building your war plot. I don't really know how everything is working in details, but there's plenty of opportunities and stuff to explore.
And on that, I will read out for people who can't fully see the chat. Eiko has pointed out that it is confirmed raid gear. Pardon me, raid gear will have more sustainability for long fights, whilst PvP gear will have bonus player damage and bonus player damage reduction, as well as remembering that raiding itself will have its own league boards per week. Now, that to me seems like the perfect segue to our next topic, Aiko.
It's almost like I was thinking about it, isn't it?
It is almost like that.
So yes, we're going to move off PvP and go straight onto the other aspect of what could be considered the elder game, or what really draws people into MMOs, at least for me anyway, and that's the PvE side of things. So we've got everything from our small group content and 5-man content of adventures, ship hands, dungeons. Then you've got your larger scale 20-man raids, and 40-man raids, which is also confirmed that they are not the same instance. The 20-man raid and the 40-man raid are entirely separate ideals and not different modes. So we're going to run through them. I know we got a lot of raiders here. I know we got a lot of dungeoneers here.
Yes, and I also want to add to it that there's also the availability in this particular discussion to talk about veterans, solo play, and there is a requested topic from viewers for this. The requested topic is daily/weekly quests. Should there be any? Should it be controlled? Should it impact anything about your gameplay? Should there be things like rep grinds? These are things that we would like you guys to discuss in this next session. Again, I'm going to leave the floor open because you guys are doing well. I'll only chip in when I notice someone keeps trying to talk, but they can't quite get in because everyone gets excited and very passionate about their individual topics. But for like the next 30 to 45 minutes, we're going to be all about PvE. The floor is open. Who wants to go first?
Well, I guess I'll start by being controversial. Dailies, rep, faction, these things should actually all exist. Whether dailies should exist in the format in which we know them from other games, and if you know the design history of dailies and why they made the choices they made, it's actually quite interesting, but that would take me 10 minutes to run through, so I'm not going to. However, limited repetitive quests with timing limits that contribute towards a longer term reward are actually good in terms of investment in your character. Dailies whereby you feel compelled to do 73 things that take you 22 hours and 19 minutes every single day so you don't fall behind an invisible curve are a bad thing. So having a limited set of things that should be designed not to come across as dailies, maybe certain things you can do in a longer period of time but only do once per X, that generate a long-term reward, are good. But they should take time, and they should represent long-term investment in your character. At least that's my take.
Well, I don't really like the daily system as it's implemented in games like World of Warcraft or Terra, but I like it how it's done in Guild Wars 2. So for those people that doesn't know the difference, I will explain shortly. Basically, in World of Warcraft, you have a set of quests that you can do every day. Now they have improve it, and you have different quests every day. It's not always the same, but basically it's still doing a quest, a specific quest, and when you do that for 2 months, you get sick tired of it. In Terra, it's kind of the same, but even more grindy than in World of Warcraft. I don't like this system because it will kind of force players to do them. Even if it's not a real enforcement, players will have so much advantage to do them that they will do it. And it's a little bit boring. In Guild Wars 2, it's different because you kind of do the same activity, and some days, for instance, you will have a jumping puzzle daily quest. So if you're doing a jumping puzzle that day, it will continue your dailies. And so it is not some specific quest that you have to grind. It simply rewards you on certain activities, and even of changing it every day, you can as well choose 5 of them out of 10. So there's 10 different quests that are proposed to you, and you select 5 of them and you complete those 5. And so it gives you a lot more choice, and it respects more what you're doing. In Guild Wars 2, you can do PvP, for instance, as a daily quest, and it will reward you in the same way that if you were doing a jumping puzzle or exploration or killing 20 mobs of some kind or finishing a dungeon. But
That's a very good point, Eloa. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I'd forgotten about how well Guild Wars 2 had done their dailies. And just like Dirk pointed out in the chat, the number of times I'd actually completed my dailies without realizing it, just as I was bouncing around all over the place, was incredible. I just got a reward pop up, and I hadn't realized I'd done my dailies. It was fantastic.
So what you're saying is that you'd much prefer a daily system rather than saying this is a daily quest. You have sort of a daily contribution to the game, kind of, daily play. Just sort of play the game and we'll reward you for doing X amount per day.
yeah,
Rather than go to this island and do these 10 quests.
Something like that. The point that I think ought to be retained is that a long-term planned structured investment in your character has a payoff.
yeah, I agree with you, Miss Pa, because daily quests, even if people hate them, they still do them. Every morning they log on their character and they do them for whatever rewards they can earn. And I think that in a game like Wildstar, you will have so many rewards possible. You could even go completely in the Guild Wars 2 route and have tokens to finish your daily quest, and then use those tokens in special shop like a housing shop. Why not? And then you will be motivated to do those quests, no matter how they are implemented, to buy your fancy cosmetic stuff. And this is good as well, and it will retain players more.
I must admit that I liked dailies when, not the actual daily quests, but in WoW, when they implemented the rotation on the dungeons. You had a daily dungeon to do, and you got extra tokens and extra gold. That kind of daily I liked, because it was like, oh, what do I get today? Okay, yeah, of course you always get that dungeon that you hate one day of the week, sort of thing. But I prefer that kind of a daily where you just get a bonus for what you're doing and what perhaps you would already be doing, than necessarily being forced to go and kill 10 things on a little island.
Yep. But to me, the point of the daily is twofold. One, from a design perspective, it's a reason to come back in and do something, getting that perpetual login, which is good for Wildstar. Secondly, I would like to have the ability to make my character better than someone else's character over time by putting more effort in. It's as simple as that. People want to find a way to make themselves better. I mean, I will wear a pink tutu in game that gives me 0.001% of any given stat. Give me 1,000 cosmetic items, I don't give a what's it. How do I make my character better over time?
Yeah, true. You have to have the feeling of being unique, you know. Otherwise, you're just another toon in Wildstar. But I think with a limited action set, also you're going to have a more unique feeling, because the way you make your own build and all the other stuff that comes with it, maybe stats on items and stuff like that. But about dailies, I love the idea about implementing it like in Guild Wars, where you just play and you get stuff from just playing, not doing certain quests, because that's really boring and those quests don't change it, so it stays boring forever.
And
I
that's
Reputation grinding. Oops, sorry. Reputation grinding. That's the same sort of thing you do every day, isn't it?
Yeah, reputation grinding is okay, but if you do it like, if you're raiding, and you could do like reputation grinding through raiding, or through like maybe PvP, like attacking a certain base that's like the opposite or the counterpart of another base, you get reputation through that as well. There's yeah, I think you can do more with that by just grinding is not a solution, you know.
I think there has to be a different approach to this. There is, for one part, the daily quests, which are very important to a game, just to keep people interested, which are just casual gamers, and say, okay, let's log on for an hour and do my dailies, or do the daily dungeon, or whatever. On the other hand, you have to have the ability to just say, okay, I'm playing my character for a year now, and I want to improve my character, maybe one specific item, or a really cool looking armor that I really want to go for. And if you have to do, let's say, not only reputation grinding, which you do by just playing the game, but like a very long quest series, or if it may be that you have to reach a certain amount of dungeon clears to do so, that you get a very nice reward, which feel, hey, I have done something that apparently not everyone can do or hasn't had the time yet to do so. And this is just way more rewarding if you just put in like 2 weeks of effort and you got that brilliant new sword and you can show it off to your friends. It's way more haunting to me than saying, hey, I did my daily today and I get 1 gold for that.
This is a good point to bring in the concept of the fact that it has been mentioned for dungeons, or not dungeons, but for raids, that an attunement will be required to enter raids. Now, there was a discussion previously when it came to dailies about how rep grinds, if they have a purpose, for example, gaining access to a dungeon or gaining access to things beyond just simply a vendor that gives away weapons or what have you, that is more of an enjoyment factor than, say, just grinding for the money or grinding for the tokens to get that shiny sword. Do you guys have any opinions or thoughts on that kind of distinction, where you actually have to, say, do the rep grind to get to the dungeons, or do the long quest chain, what have you, to gain an attunement to the raids?
Just before we go fully into that, I want to bring up something Stout Pint has mentioned in the chat, and that's, well, it's the truth behind dailies. Dailies, as we know them now, they were existed to put a cap on how much you could gain per day. They were to slow down grinds and give them a minimum time. So with reputation grinding, would you, if you're having to do attunements for reputation grinding, what's the effects of that if you're now having to, you've got a cap on how much you can get per day, but you also say need to get to loved to hell by these guys in order to go into their dungeon or raid? And where do you stand on the inclusion of dailies in that sort of system, or would you rather see it that you can sit there, play for a weekend and get your loved status because you just sat there and did nothing but grind it out.
There are those of us very much liked the journey in older iterations of WoW. To give an example, that you had to go through to get into a given dungeon. You had to do long quest chains, you had to get hold of keys, you had to go into things, you had to go through a series of attunements, and it helped everyone understand that they had to get to a certain point in their character and in their game to be able to, get into and possibly start to achieve certain sorts of content. And long quest chains as part of an attunement are great. I also think rep as part of an attunement can also be very good, but it depends on how the acquisition of that rep is implemented. But do I, as a principle, think there should be a minimum achievement bar to reach? You must be so high to ride this ride? Absolutely, that should be in place.
Yeah, I agree with you, Misbah, because in at the start of WoW there were like really long quest lines, and people that weren't into like nowadays you can just join a group from in your city or whatever, but back in those days you really had to work to achieve something. You had to do the quest line. You had to find help. Maybe that also encourages the community to help each other do those quest lines. You had to do something to get into a dungeon, and that point alone makes it great, to be honest.
You're not advocating group play at MMO, surely not, Hammerless.
No.
I like the attunement system as well. But in the Burning Crusade in World of Warcraft, for those that remember it, it was maybe a bit over the top. But to not have any sort of attunement, I feel it's missing something. I like it, as you have said before me, it's allow guilds to build themselves, to help their player, etc. The only thing which is very boring and that need to be think of is that in the Burning Crusade, to take back this example, the problem was when you were a guild that were raiding, let's say, the Dark Temple, which was like tier 3 or the third raid you could do, and you wanted a new tank because you were missing one suddenly. If you could not recruit any other tank, it posed a problem for recruitment and for guild progression. It was really something difficult because the recruitment, the attunement at that time was a little bit too far. You had to go with all your guild, all your raids inside a red instance to get the item, to get the attunement, blah, 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 blah. That was a little bit too complicated. And so I'm all for attunement if it's not going that far and that doesn't break down the recruitment and the progression of a whole guild just because they are missing one guy.
It's a balancing act. I mean, maybe an attunement could be in some cases, at a guild level. I don't know, just throwing a thought out there. I like them being hard, but maybe some attunements should be easier than others, but maybe some what's perceived to be top tier content should be harder. These things don't all have to be as easy or difficult as each other. As the Dist pointed out, killing 5,000 centaurs, that's bad. That's lazy game design. In fact, it's not really game design, that's just an artificial barrier.
I really agree with you. The attunement for a guild, like Soulbound to guild, it will be awesome. That's really the best idea I've ever heard in terms of that.
Particularly if it takes multiple people from the guild to contribute to actually achieve it.
Yes, of course, then it needs to be something difficult and hard and very challenging that involves probably a previous raid or multiple dungeon run. But yeah, totally. Then you will not have this problem of inviting someone in your guild that's just behind the other and to have to redo everything just for this guy.
Well, there is a system which I recall from Guild Wars 1 where you had a mission where you had to impregnate your armor because the enemies would just deal a lot of damage to you if you hadn't. So you could always take that mission and go on it, so you could probably do a dungeon or something, but it will be very, very hard if you don't have the pre-quest, and it can be made so hard that it's nearly impossible to achieve that if you don't have like the full equip. But if you do have or made some steps toward that, you might be a little bit in a disadvantage. But if your group is very skilled, you might still be able to pull it off, and it doesn't restrict you to something in particular, but makes it over time easier if you invest more time to a specific raid or dungeon.
I remember that quest and mechanism in Guild Wars 1, and it was awesome.
Definitely.
Do we have any thoughts about the differences between dungeons versus adventures?
Are people aware, well, at least of what we know to be the difference between dungeons and adventures? Because they're both 5-man group PvE group content that you'll probably be looking to do in order to get gear progression up to sort of a raiding standard. I would have thought that is assumption. But the idea is, I believe, that adventures would play out much more like the Guild Wars 2 explorable dungeons, where you have strategic choices and different paths to choose, and dungeons might be much more like what you're expecting when someone says a dungeon. So, very linear, maybe potentially big path. I think adventures are aimed at like 45 minutes and dungeons are hour and a half, going from the MMO buff interview.
I can certainly comment on the dungeons. There are a range of timings. I think 45 minutes to 1 hour 15 is the current spread.
Okay.
We do not really know so much about adventure, but I will hope they include your past abilities. That would be really something cool. A little bit like Star Wars was doing, when you had your crafting, then you could open a secret way. If you were like an alchemist or whatever, biotech, you could take off the poison of a place to go through this shortcut. And if you were cyber thingy, you could open a secret door and stuff like that.
A short way of like the secret world. If you have a crafting that you can do, and you can open that, and then open it in that way, and that's for you.
Well, the adventures themselves are, in my opinion, something that just produce content. It's not something hardcore like raids where you really need 40 man. It's something more aimed for the casuals, in my opinion. You do have it while leveling, which is nice because it just adds flavor. But with the advanced mode, I just forgot the name. I'm sorry.
Veteran, I believe it's called.
Veteran, thank you. I think it just opens a variety of things you can do in one instance. You may choose different paths. You may even exclude a boss if your group can handle it, if you choose another path. And it just adds a lot of variety, and players can hop into it, have a good time, even if they are not a trained group, and say, okay, let's do this. We have an hour to play, and then we all can get back to work or something.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me for the question, but did they announce any other format of raiding except a 40-man?
Yes, we have individual 20-man raids, which are separate.
Yes, I was going to say they are separate. It is not like you're getting a 20-man version of one raid and then you can do a 40-man version of that same raid. That is not how it works. They are distinct and separate.
Oh, that's nice. But
40-man ratings for the mad people.
It's also out there, I believe, that the difficulty levels are going to be tiered between them.
Also, going back to the previous question about the quest, there was also like a really very big quest chain, not quest chain, but more of gathering of resources that the server had to do the whole community, the whole server had to do to open. I think it was AQ40 in WoW, and something like that brings together the community, open a dungeon. In my opinion, that's really great.
Oh yes, I've think about that today actually, and I totally agree with you. This event was so awesome, and it bring server pride, something which has disappeared for most of game today. That would really be great.
Something I really liked, and no, I didn't from the AQ quest chain, was it allowed groups to work together, but it also allowed there to actually be a winner. And I'm too fed up as society going, hey, we all played, we're all special snowflakes. No, Bob did it best. But Bob was the most organised, had the best support, was the better player, whatever it might be. But now Bob has the mount that no one else on this server is ever going to get. And actually, I think that's absolutely fantastic game design. And I really hope we start to see that sort of thing again. Not everyone's a hero because you sneezed, but here's a tangible achievement you either do or don't have.
True. Second thought.
I couldn't agree more with that. After playing Guild Wars 2, which I feel is the sort of most recent example of everyone can do everything. And it's not a bad thing in many ways, but for me personally, it was a case of I don't feel any real character progression or any different to anybody else. No matter how much time I put in, there's no difference between my character and someone who's, just dinged 80 and got some exotic gear. I just feel that the whole, you don't have to do this to do this to do this. There's no sort of, you have to unlock this dungeon to go to this dungeon to go to this dungeon, or anything like that. It's completely stripped out, and I feel that that's massively missing in a lot of recent MMOs.
Yeah, but for the sake of Guild Wars 2, this is a completely different game, and I agree with you. There is no feeling of progression, but this game is made like that, and I find it well made because it's allowing you to play with your friends at the first level, etc. I'm happy that each game got their own specificities, and Guild Wars 2 is very good in that area. It doesn't please everyone. And I'm happy that Wildstar will go in a completely different route, and it will boom more in the line of what World of Warcraft Vanilla was. And I think a lot of players that played World of Warcraft Vanilla or Burning Crusade missed that feeling. And here in Wildstar, you really have the feeling that the developers, and some of them come from Blizzard, they are putting all the stuff that we preferred and that we miss from this game, and that we are eager to find back, and we will never find back in World of Warcraft because it has evolved into something completely different. And that's what really thrilled me about this game. I want to see what they're doing, how they make to modernize and refresh this first impression we had 9 years ago, or some of us.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And look how many of the older, shall I politely use the term veteran, Warcraft players have started coming out of the woodwork. And it's only a very good thing. It's a demographic that hasn't really been well served for quite a long time. One thing, and I don't know if we're there yet, and if I'm stealing anyone's thunder for where we're going next, but has there been any thoughts on really what people expect in terms of the raid gameplay experience, as we seem to be heading that way?
That's a good direction for us to head into.
I think a lot of people will think that it will be easy with the telegraphs, but I don't think you should underestimate it.
There has been mention based on just seeing Storm Talon's lair, with the telegraphs, the environment, the tornadoes, and everything in there. If that's just the first dungeon you walk into, what do you think is going to happen in a raid?
They keep saying they're going to get mental by the time you go into raiding.
What I'd like to hear from people is what you want to see. What is it that you would love to see in a raid environment, be it 20, be it 40? What is the type of gameplay that would excite you in Wildstar?
I could easily start, but I'll pause because I've been talking a lot.
Have you? I hadn't noticed.
Go ahead. Anyone else other than Mispa may have the floor.
Can you repeat the question? Because I was typing.
What in raids would you like to see, either mechanic-wise, play-wise, boss-wise? What would excite you in a raid? So I guess what I'm asking is, what do you hope Wildstar brings to you in a raid environment? They have mentioned world bosses.
I think personally that what people are most excited for is that it will be not something everyone can achieve. It will be very, very hard to actually accomplish dungeon just to clear it. You got every single boss there, and I really hope they kind of get it like Dark Souls did, that you try something and you fail and you try again and you fail and so forth until you really can say, okay, we now got the technique to defeat that and that boss or that and that stage in the raid itself, and then go on, hey, we did the first boss, but there's like 7 more, and that it takes time and effort to actually accomplish it, and that is very, very hard for, let's say, non-organized groups to get into them.
I think
Yeah.
I think the like one of the biggest things which they have mentioned is the whole sort of randomization or the changing each week that they were talking about. That's one of the biggest things for me with raids, is keeping it fresh, because I don't mind doing a raid over and over again, but there gets a point where, okay, it becomes a rinse and repeat. It becomes a daily, if you know what I mean. You know, there's no difference. Whereas if there's just, you know, even it only has to be small things that throw you off from that pattern, that you have to relearn how to do an encounter. That's the kind of thing that makes me excited for raiding.
Yes, I really.
Oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go.
Go on.
Okay. It really excites me. Yeah, the refreshing. You cannot see in YouTube filmpje. You see YouTube filmpje and you can see. Oh, that are the tactics. Okay, I do that. Okay, fine. Now the next time it is not the same. I love that.
Variety is something they seem to be pushing strongly when it comes to PvE content.
It's a nice thing. It's refreshed the whole genre. To have this change from one week to another, it will require guild to be very coordinated, to be smart, to outsmart themselves, to be able to adapt themselves very fast. But also, it will remove the boredom you can easily have if you get stuck to the same boss all over during 5 or 7 weeks straight. You will get tired. Some guild might become the breakdown and fight and whatever can happen. So to do this, it's very excellent because it will allow the developers to put difficulties to the content without frustrating too much the player, because every week you will have the chance to have maybe a more easy boss, or maybe you will be more lucky. Of course, it's involve luck, so you might also be very unlucky. But this change and this refreshment will allow you to not get tired or burned out as fast as you can be in other game, and still have this challenge. And I think that most of people that want to raid here really want to find the challenge back, the challenge that has been removed from a game like World of Warcraft.
So I guess I'll pick the pause to jump in. To me, raiding means something very significant. It changes the bar in terms of what the players need to bring to the table, and that's players plural, not players individual. Raiding should have a tiered set of difficulty demands. The first demand is, of course, on the organisation and commitment to get the right people there in the right time. This should be the ultimate in PvE content. You need to get that organized group into that location at that time. At that point, every single player needs to actually have a minimum skill bar they need to achieve to do a given thing. You might have a patchwork type DPS knock this over to show you can go into the dungeon. You might have a massive organizational fight to get, past a certain point. Individual players should need to demonstrate certain skills. Classes should be able to prove their worth doing the things that they do best. I go back to my hunter days. And there were times when, the hunter could do something unique and it was needed to progress. There were times when the mage could do something unique. I want to see the return of crowd control and utility, and we know there's a ton of crowd control mechanics that are in there. I want to see group coordination. I want to see errors causing deaths. I want there to be consequence. I want this to be content that not everyone can achieve, but certainly, let's say at the 20-man, I'd love it to be content that the majority of groups can achieve given enough time. I want there to be the days where Valistras turns around and keeps you here for 4 weeks because you've just got to get good enough. All of those things no longer exist in a current PvE context in any game. And then when you move on to the 40-mans and you move on to the back end of 40-man content and you move on to progression content, I want the days where the guides don't exist. I want to be able to have to sit there and write the rulebook. And I want those few that manage to do so to be able to say, look at what we've managed to do. Over time, make them accessible to everybody, but don't do so too quickly. Make them hard, make them challenging, make them kill people. Use the variation systems they're talking about to keep the challenge fresh, but make us work for our rewards, and let the few that do so in the first wave ideally get something unique to have forevermore, be it a title, an achievement, a gear, a different colour, change in stats, something. If I killed something day 1, why is the reward the same for someone that kills something at day 1000 when the game has progressed? Raiding. It should be hard. That's it.
And I'm just going to take that quick, brief moment of Myth actually taking a breath to mention something that Rain has brought up in the Twitch chat, which is how do you guys, as raiders, feel about the 20-40-man split, and would you rather get your 40-man team and just go straight into 40 and bash your heads against it, or do you think that it's okay that there should be some sort of requirement for you to split into 2 groups, complete your 20-man, get your base tier of gear for raiding, and then head off into 40-man raiding? And the other thing I just wanted to bring up before I let you guys have at it again, Wildstar or Multiple Point Carbine have said on multiple occasions about the release cycle of new content and how they admire what Guild Wars does with, I think it's 2 weeks release cycle that they're on now, that you'll get some sort of new content. And they're also aware that, people don't want to be farming the same raid dungeon for 3 to 4 months of an entire year. So what would you guys expect to see as a sort of acceptable / optimal release cycle for raid content that would balance, the quality of the content against getting new content, really?
First of all, I'm happy that you have to do the 24 mans, or at least that it's an advantage to do first the 20 man to gear up to go then in 40 man, or that you could jump directly in 40 man for the more hardcore people, and there is some that will be able to do that. So it allows the really elite players to have their own challenge, while still allow the more average players to get things going and to warm up before to enter in the big game. I also think that it's very important that there is challenging content for 20 person for smaller guilds, so they do not have to recruit or to ally with another guild to make 40 man to make the biggest challenge, because some guilds like to be small and like to do hardcore stuff, and they should have also their hardcore stuff to do and not to be forced to be 40 to be able to do it. So like heroic or veteran version of a 20 man or a very hard 20 man should also be implemented in the game. Now to go to the other subjects. Damn, I don't remember now. What was you were saying?
We are asking about how to balance out the difference between 40-man and 20-man, and that's pretty much what I want us to stick to for just this moment.
I'm of the opinion you should. I'm going to go straight to 40-man content. Mainly because I believe that my guild will have 40 people ready to raiding straight away, as it were, when we hit there. So, yeah.
Well, we may need to split into two and run 20s first. It all depends on the design direction, but my understanding is that there is a tiered difficulty system between the two. To what degree the skill gap versus the gear gap is needed to bridge that is something we'll have to find out when the details emerge.
Indeed. However, I'm going to argue here. I'm still of the opinion that, yeah, I like to go in the 40-man content and I'd smack my head against that without the gearing necessary in the 20-mans. You know, it's the content for 40-man raiding. It's the stuff I've never done. I've done 25-man raiding, I've never done 40-man raiding. So I'm of the opinion that attunement aside, once you're attuned, then yeah, you should just be able to go in and have some fun.
What if the attunement process required 20-man raiding? For example, in order to gain access to the 40-man raid, you must have killed the bosses in the 20-man raid.
Well, that's yeah. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you'd have to do that. But I hope they don't do that. I hope the attunement is some other method.
It depends how big the skill gap is. If the skill gap is significant, then that approach might make a lot of sense. Again, it's a you must be so tall to ride this ride. The question is, for how long, if that were the case, would you need to keep farming stuff? To what degree is it gear? To what degree is it movement and awareness and skill? And that's just an unknown.
I like when players have different options or where guilds have different options to make their own progression. For instance, I always like when the end game you can choose between different instances. Will you do this first instance or this one, or maybe you will do the first boss of this instance and this instance before to move forward. And to be able to jump directly into 40-man, even if it's harder, it is a choice that you can do. And if you don't like it, or if you change your mind, you still can do the other instance. And that's why I also really appreciate that they have done two different raiding instances for the 40-man and the 20, and that it's not just a level change. Because firstly, I thought the 40-man was the same than the 20-man, but just bigger, like World of Warcraft is doing now. And so I find it very interesting because it leaves more choice. Even your 40-man guilds could work on this 40-man raid every Thursday, and then you have a smaller group that do it on the Sunday, for instance, just the 20-man, and not everyone is forced to participate, just the players that want to do it. More choice, the better.
We are going to have 10 minutes more on this particular topic. What I want to throw out there, because we are discussing PvE, is something that no one has seemed to touch upon yet, and that are things like the solo play, the endgame solo that they have discussed about, shiphands, expeditions. Are there any thoughts along those lines? Anything that you wish to see, things that you do not wish to see, things that concern you, things that you have heard that you are excited about?
I will jump in again. I really think that it's amazingly good to create end-game content for solo players. Some person really like to play alone. Some players don't want to be part of a guild or don't have the time to put themselves into a guild. And some players have just so much time that they are bored if they don't have something challenging for themselves. World of Warcraft has introduced something like that this expansion, which is the brawling arena, which is very difficult, and it's one person that just have to beat bosses, and once you defeat one you have different rank and blah blah blah. You progress like that, and I think the progression is kind of long, and the last bosses are very hard, and you have a super unique moons at the end. And I think that's kind of content, it's very good. It's make more stuff to do, more challenging to look forward, and it's gonna only be a good thing.
Individual challenge is a huge plus. One of the best pieces of content I've ever run into in any game was the get the right way around, the Rock de la quest, if I can still remember the name, for the hunter back in vanilla. So as an individual, you had to achieve a certain challenge that at the time was actually quite hard, to continue down a quest chain to get an ultimate piece of gear. The priests had a similar one, with the eye being the drop that triggered it, I believe. The Secret World has some stuff whereby you need to be able to kill a certain boss solo that's geared towards your given playstyle, tank, DPS, heals, to be able to get into stuff. So something that makes people go, this is what I do, and this is the skill level I have at it, as a solo test is also hugely valuable. There's no reason why solos shouldn't be as tested as raiders.
Any further thoughts that anyone wishes to bring about PvE as a whole? Anything?
Maybe about itemization in PvE. What do you guys think about having a really good item at the end of, like, the end boss, you know, having, you know, the opportunity or the chance to get a legendary?
Disagree. Don't like legendaries.
Strongly agree. Low chance.
Yeah, very, very low chance. I kind of find fun when you have, or it could even just be cosmetic, you know, something very rare. I think everyone like that, to have the stuff that no one else have, that you really have, that show off that you have been raiding with your guild and you have defeated that boss and that you had been the lucky one on the server to have that unique item. It doesn't need particularly to be stronger in terms of statistic, but at least to look awesome. That's maybe just for the bragging right, you know.
I
I
actually
actually
like.
just,
Go get.
I was going to say, the whole legendary item, as in an item, one particular item, I disagree with. If it was as a whole the raid who caused the boss to go fall flat on his face or her face, then yeah, something for all of them, whether it be a mount, a hat, a chain, something that's noticeable. Yes, I don't agree with the fact that it should be just one item, and then it's who gets to choose who gets the item, and that's where problems start.
Well, if the content requires a coordinated guild to achieve, then a coordinated guild, I'm sorry, they have to take on the challenge of distributing loot. It's part of the parcel. I hate individual loot. I hate utter randomness. Both of those things are bad in terms of loot distribution. I actually quite like the idea of once in a blue moon, and blue moon might mean, you know, once every 2 months something drops on the server for a faction, where someone gets, you know, the legendary or the artifact, and maybe over a year there's 5 or 6 floating around the population. I like that. I'll probably never ever see one, but it's something to strive for.
Yeah, it's something to look forward and to try your best. But it doesn't need to be something specifically with high level stats. It's just if it's looking cool, I think it's enough.
That's where I disagree. I will jump through burning hoops for 1% of stat. As I said earlier, I will have no inclination to do something just because a skin looks different.
Although by what you just said about having an item that perhaps there's only 5 of on a server, that's not necessarily something you can ever work towards, because it's so random, there's no way of knowing that you'd ever get it.
You may never get it, but let's say that an item has a cooldown between 30 and 60 days of when it can drop. Its drop percentage chance is 0.005%, and it's on the loot table for the end boss of a raid. And if it did drop last night, it cannot drop for another 60 days.
If it's on a specific boss, like the only thing I can think of that annoyed the hell out of me was Ashes of Alar in WoW. That was one of the things. But I can agree to that. Something like that that's on a boss that is incredibly random. The way you put it sounded like it was across the whole world. It would just drop somewhere off something. But no, if it's off somewhere you know where you can get it, and if you keep trying, perhaps you stand a better chance than someone who doesn't bother at all, then yeah.
And put it at the end of the raid, you know, not at the front.
But it shouldn't. The item in question should be useful for all classes within the raid.
I
not
agree
just
with that.
hunter loot or warrior loot or stalker loot or
Sorry,
warrior loot
hunter loot.
or whatever it
Correct.
might be.
Make,
It's always
make an
hunter
MP
loot, isn't it?
Hopefully, make an NPC shop. Put the items in a shiny case that no one can ever get without the token, but the whole world knows they're there and they know what the stats are.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
why
think-
mounts always work so well.
So everyone
Yeah.
just stands around it with the old wardrobe on,
I
inspecting
think
it.
with like healers being able also to do DPS, I think that opportunity be more plausible, you know.
There has been mention of the fact that when it comes to gear, through the classes, each class has a very specific type of weapon that they use. So, for example, based on what you guys are saying, you would not like to see, say, guns drop that only spell slingers can use as a legendary item. You would much rather see something like, you guys, as you were saying, a mount, a hat, a walking staff that allows people to summon monks or roused hours, whatever. But it's something that anybody can use and is not broken down to just class specific or even role specific.
Oh, I don't know. I quite like the idea of the spellslinger guns.
That's because you plan on
Um,
playing a spell slinger, but that's beside the point.
However, make it a token, make it a weapon, make it meaningful, but make it a token item that drops, so whatever class gets it, they can get their weapon for their class.
Yeah, but that's less legendary if it's a token that you can have. It needs to be the weapon of the boss.
Make
It
it
has
something
been-
that transforms when the person picks it up.
It
Make
has
make it the
been-
living essence of the last roused hour, or something, the last blue roused hour that automatically melds to your form and becomes a blah, depending on who equips it.
I was going to state that Gaffney has stated previously that when a boss is using a really awesome sword, the boss should drop the sword that he's using. So there has been discussion about using what you see on the different bosses in dungeons and raids as becoming available items for players to use.
That's a good news.
I suppose it doesn't matter actually to me if it's class specific, as long as over time these incredibly rare drops, should they even exist, cycle through all the classes and different phases of the game. What would be unreasonable if, let's use the Spellslinger Guns example, if there are 5 of them who have been unearthed in a year's worth of play and 3 of them were Spellslinger Guns. Yeah, I would totally agree that's unreasonable. But if there have been, 6 of them unearthed in 2 years of play, then maybe each class should have a stab once.
I personally feel that that's too rare. If not at the same time, every class can get something. I much prefer the idea that it's a token that you get, or even just whoever you decide to get the loot sort of thing, then gets the legendary of the class. I much prefer it that way than say Esper is the last class, and a year and a half later, finally I get the chance to get a 0.001% chance drop sort of thing. It gets a little bit ridiculous.
I really like the game mechanic of those drops. The downside is when it'll work for a legendary. The Kara staff, for example, the collecting the what on earth was it we were collecting in 40-man Nax to get the legendary? Great for a legendary. For an artifact, for an even higher level thing, if it's a case of collect X things, eventually there'll be too many of them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I am just going to intercede here because we have hit that 10-minute milestone that Pseudo pointed out. And just to keep the conversation moving on, we're going to go ahead into our next topic, which altogether is primarily going to be housing up front, but then the social aspects of Wildstar, what we're looking forward to again, what we know already. So we know about circles is something that you might say is new, or at least it's a formalized version of something that players have already been doing for years. So we're going to talk about that for a little bit, and we'll go from there. I think we'll keep it in the same open floor format. It's been working well tonight.
One thing that we would like to have a focus on when it comes to housings is the opinion of the impact housing and player housing can have on towns, or towns could have on housing. We'd like to know what your fears are, what your beliefs are, what your hopes are, what your dreams are, even what your nightmares are. Remember, everything that we're pretty much discussing is going to be heard by someone from Carbine, because the devs are listening. So it's your chance to influence. But yes, the floor is open, and have at it.
Well, I think that I really like the housing idea, but it's true that it needs to have a good reason to stick in town. If you can do everything that you can do in town in your house, some people might stay in their house all the time. And so either you should really make easy to get into the house of someone, like the World Guild. You can invite her, your World Guild, or you can invite your group or your friend or whatever. Or you need to have better price in town or facilities in towns that you cannot have in your house, no matter how advanced you have made it. Like, I don't know, crafting stuff or portals, or I don't know. I know so far you can almost do everything in your house. There's so many things that you can do that I don't see so much the interest of going back in town, but I believe that it's important that there is still interest to go in the world and to populate it and to make it active and dynamic.
I think that for the whole reason of, you know, like banks, auction houses, crafting stations, whatever, there's also a good point that sockets in your house, like or your plot rather, the plugs that you can put into the sockets, there's a limited amount, so it's not like you can have all the cool things plus the bank plus the auction house. You have to make choices of what you have. Sure, you could just have all of the amenities that you can have in town and just ignore all of the cool looking stuff. But there is quite a sort of definite choice between, am I going to have a bank here all the time, or am I just going to go to town for the bank and stuff? And I believe I also heard that like auction house and stuff, you do get a better price, or that was the idea, that you'd get a better price if you go into town than if you did it from your house and stuff like that. So
Circles? Guilds?
Well, I can certainly jump in with guilds. A major concern stroke area that I'd like to see more information on is about the tools and systems that are made available to guilds. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes running a guild. I have a suspicion we have in this channel a number of people that know exactly what I'm talking about. For those that have always had fun participating in a guild, the mechanisms to drive and run a guild aren't always clear. Simple things like getting permissions right, getting an audit log right, so you can work out who did or didn't take something out of the guild bank, having good mechanics for ranks and separations of roles,
Having a guild bank in the first place.
Having a guild bank in the first place, having an API so you can send information to your website should you so wish, having good ways of communicating with the guild, having perks that are associated with membership of the guild to help build a sense of community and a benefit. Guilds are a social structure that can help to drive the game, not only in terms of player activities, but also in terms of long-term player retention. Get the tools right to allow the guilds to be successful, and the social community in the game will be successful.
As was pointed out by the DIST, we need guild housing. This was something that was brought up during the North American Town Hall. If there is the implementation of guild housing, how would it be distinguished between player housing? What would the differences be? What would the purposes be? Would this be something that you guys would like to see? One of the things that was mentioned as a possibility during the previous town hall was, let us say that Guild X goes out, kills a particular world boss, they get its head, the head can go up in the guild hall or the guild house instead of an individual player's house, whereas individual achievements could go up in a person's individual player house. Or say you went and you did a war plot, but things that would separate the two. And again, is this something you would like to see? Maybe not necessarily at launch, but perhaps in the future.
I'd like to jump in here. I'd like to see guild housing, but I know player housing is instance, but I'd like to see guild housing in towns. So other players can visit your guild house to see your achievements. It would be awesomely peeing.
I think
Whatever it's
that would
called.
be awesome, but in that case, I think possibly have instanced guild housing that's quite easy to achieve, so everyone with a guild can participate with it, and maybe have uninstanced guild housing that's remarkably difficult to achieve, and needs to be maintained or you lose it. Because obviously we don't want the world overrun with 10 bajillion guild TPs or whatever it is that people come up with. But guild housing should be a place to show the guild's achievements, not an individual. I might run a guild, but why do I want to go back to my house with the head of a greater left-winged umlaut or whatever it is that we get to kill? That should go in the guild house.
Yes, I agree with that. And to have a public guild house is a lot more appealing than just an instanced guild house, because we already have the personal guild house, the personal house. What I would like to see if guild housing is implemented is a connection to each individual housing. If the member, of course, allow other member to go, I don't know, it could be a portal and you have a choice to go to that member house or something like this. Something to, how can I say, build a bridge, maybe even literally, between the guild house and each member personal housing. So one housing system is not completely making the other outdated or, well, not so cool anymore.
I do remember Jeremy Gaffney saying that like housing being instanced offers a hell of a lot more that they can do with that because it's instanced and not in the open world. So things like Dist is talking about in chat, actually connecting houses or into a sort of town, a guild town almost, and stuff like that would be far more realistic because it's instanced.
There could be one possible implementation, and that would be to hybridize the two. I don't think you could have everything uninstanced available in the real world with guilds. All of a sudden, where do you find room to put 80 houses times however many guilds? It's just not going to happen and be manageable. I could imagine something whereby, let's say you're in a guild and you have your individual house. You have a tick box where you say, make available in Guild City. You go into your guild house and you walk out a door. And when you walk out of that door, you're in an instance whereby there is your guild town with every single member's guild house connected that chose to put it there. That could be quite a nice balance, particularly if they couple it with a in-world guild house.
That would be awesome, actually. It's very a great idea. To have a guild town with all little floating islands and small little bridge between them, or a jumping bridge for those that want
Pink
that.
unicorns.
Huge jumping puzzle.
Yeah, those that are mean. I know someone who will
heaven.
do that because I hate jumping puzzles. No, I don't hate them. I'm just extremely bad.
Yeah, make it like Frogger with unicorns going between them that knock you over.
Guildhouse itself is very nice to just show off to some extent, but it has to have some function in some way. So if you just have a guildhouse and it's good looking, then yeah, that's it. And it probably won't be used as much. So I think that some kind of appealing functions that only a guild house can have and not your player house would be very beneficial. Might it be something that is just easing your life, like a portal or a ride to a specific dungeon, to a specific location in the world, which you can choose, which is just one teleport, but it just affects you and your guild, that you just can say, okay, let's go to the guild house, meet up there, get our raid together, go through that portal and get, let's say, a 15-minute buff for damage or healing or something like that.
I can think of a host of things that could benefit for guild housing, but of course it can't be over the top, because then there's this exponential advantage that keeps taking place. But let's say, for example, you had a guild bank accessible from the guild house. Let's say you had the ability to do a guild only members auction from within the guild house. Let's say you had the ability to deposit funds or pay a guild tax from within the guild house. Let's say there was a roster of every single person in the guild visible within the guild house. I could go on and come up with 50 such things, but they need to benefit the guild and showcase the achievements of the guild.
Didn't you get, like, if you did normal housing, didn't you get like a portal already through to a certain instance or stuff? Yeah, something you could adjust in your housing.
The housing dev speak video said, and how about a raid portal with a buff? I think, or something like that, but we don't know the mechanics of how that's going to operate. And maybe a guild one that I think someone said a minute ago, where the raid leader turns around and goes, "This is where it's going to emerge in the open world, guys. We meet up at the guild house." And by the way, I wouldn't like it to put people in the dungeon. People need to be seen turning up in the open world and
getting ganked. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing.
Yeah.
Not getting
See,
ganked,
that's
as the case
cool
may
thing.
be.
At the entrance,
That was the
waiting
thing we
for your
missed.
instant, stalker comes up behind you and wallop. Dead.
Yeah, don't go out of the instance. They're ganking.
That's the thing I miss from raiding, is the fact that you used to, all meet up at a certain point and then all head to the location. And then everybody would hang around and while waiting maybe for a couple of people, and all of a sudden the opposing faction would turn up and start ganking or start PvPing. And it'd be like, no, we're here to raid. Go inside. Stop PvPing. So...
Something that is that has been discussed previously in regards to social, and this was from not the North American one, but the previous one. When it comes to the community, it seems to be a very delicate balance catering to the different play styles that there are. For example, as Gaffney stated in the luncheon talk that he did with quite a few people, there tends to be a 60 to 70% of Western players who are solo players. And then you have the guilds, and then you have the groups, and then you have the social players who only play with, say, their boss and their best friend on a Friday night. And it seems as if Wildstar is attempting to cater to most, if not all. Do you believe that this is a solid direction for them? Do you believe that they're making the right choices? And something else I want to point out, we are having a redrop of a lot of classes because changes have been made. Who's to say player housing won't get a redrop as well? Do you think that's a possibility?
I think player housing is such, from what I'm aware of from the dev speaks, and from what people have seen at exhibitions, is so well fleshed out. I believe they even spoke once about it being a core design tenet that was integrated in so early into the process. It would be difficult to see that change fundamentally, but of course housing can evolve based on the sockets and the things you actually get to put in houses.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's housing is just something extra. It's not about the core gameplay. Housing for me is, it's something on the side.
Okay.
It's something on the side, but that can
User in your
keep
channel timed
a
out.
lot of players busy. And if you can do your crush thing via your house, and if it's make it easy, a little bit like World of Warcraft made in Pandaria with the farm, where you can plant a mineral. If you are not a miner, you can obtain minerals that way. And if they put stuff like this, it will be an advantage to have a house. It will help you for raiding and maybe for war plot and PvP. So I think it's maybe not most important things, but it's still intertwined with the game, and it will still make the game more rich, more deep, and have more things for players to look for and to continue to play. If they want to achieve the super house, they will hunt for it. In World of Warcraft, you have people that spend their day to collect pets or to collect moons. So I can imagine that you will have those kind of players that will collect couch and chair and painting for their wall.
I think they have said that the stuff you'll need to do to keep doing stuff to your house is integrated into every facet of the world. So I don't necessarily agree with your comment, Rain, that it's going to be fluff. I think it's too core and too intrinsically entwined in the entire world for it just to be a piece of fluff content. I would say that housing we've seen in many other games I would describe as fluff content, but I've never seen another game make a housing proposition like this one.
Well, it does offer you the chance that if you build your house in a certain way or put certain items in your house, that you get rest XP when you sleep there overnight, as it were, or when you log off, and then you can obviously increase your rested XP by doing whatever, I don't know, questing or adding bits in. So that would certainly be used for those people who find it hard to level.
I am going to point out that I am going to let you guys have 10 minutes in which to discuss anything. You can discuss classes, you can discuss PvE, you can discuss rating, you can discuss PvP, you can discuss community outreach programs, such as was mentioned in the previous one, of guilds willing to help people learn how to PvP, guilds helping to learn how to PvE. You can discuss anything you want, hopes, dreams, whatever you wish to say.
User in your
Now's
channel
your
timed
chance to
out.
say it. You get 10 minutes, and then we are going to be ending our second town hall.
Lost Whisper.
One of the most important
User entered your
questions I think
channel.
we should ask, which we raised at the last the last town meeting, and now, of course, is very important to us because, of course, Troy has left us. Now Troy has left us, who is the sexiest member of the Carbine team?
You know, considering the last town hall that we had, and I said, feel free to bring up anything you want, and Sarah made certain to let the world know that Aether was the sexiest on the Carbine team, I should have realized that this would happen again. So some
Exactly.
people are saying in the chat that it is quote daddy unquote Frost. And I'm sure there are a whole bunch of other people who might throw at others. But let's actually try to keep it about something that Wildstar can do something about.
Well, you know,
Yeah,
it's Wildstar related.
Let's direct to the game and the playing of the game, and maybe not
Yeah,
drooling over the devs so much.
exactly.
What we can say, it's the way Wildstar promoting its game, it's awesome. I was not interested in Wildstar before to see one of their video, and their Pixar kind of a tone and humor and way of making their video just completely hooked me up, and so I had to explore and to discover what this game was. And I really like the humor they put in their game, the fact that it's a young and dynamic team that are implementing a lot of fresh ideas and a lot of fresh ideas into old ideas that we liked before, old feature like 40 Man Red, or all this stuff has already been created, but they go further, they refine it, they find it a twist to make it more fun, and that's what I really appreciate in what they are doing. And so I also kind of like their attitude to be very open with the community, to share their work, to be humble, to say we have done a mistake there, but we are trying to do better there. So yeah, I'm really thrilled about that. It's all things that make me believe in this game.
I want to chime in here real quick and point out one topic that we haven't really touched on, and it's something that I do apologize for, but time has not permitted us to get to it, is the role play side of things. I must take my hat off and just simply say chairs, except add an incredibly excited tone to that with a little bit of a squeal. The fact, as you were saying, Eloa, the devs seem to be listening, they seem to be communicating, and they did something for a community that at times by game developers is thought of last. And yet they did what they could to implement chairs that people could sit in as part of the roleplay effort. And again, I apologize for not being able to dig deep into the roleplay topic, but unfortunately time is going to limit us on that. Is there anything else anyone wants to bring up?
Red queues. I don't like it. I don't know what edit want to say about it. The red queues, no, it's a no-go for me.
So raid queues bug you, sort of like looking for raid or things like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
looking for raid automatically. You press a key. Oh, I'm looking for raid. I press net zo'n raid find, dungeon find, maar dan for raids. I don't like it.
Dungeon Finder, I believe they're going to have in the game, but I can't believe initially they're going to certainly LFR as it stands won't be there.
I believe they've stated very publicly there will be no raid finder.
No, they've said that indeed, but they will have a dungeon finder, and I don't really know how they will make it.
User
but
disconnected from your
I
channel.
really hate it, and I'm a fierce and wild defender of the idea that WoW did the biggest mistake in their life in implementing the dungeon finder in Wrath of the Lich King, because it literally broke the community it deserved, the whole MMO community, by encouraging players to be asshole, lazy, impatient, all kind of really bad quality you can think of. And well, now it's implemented in the mentalities of players. They expect to push on a button and to be teleported magically in a group and to not need to say hello or anything like that, to have their loot at the end of the boss. But I really hope if they make a dungeon finder, they make it like it was in the old day, or like it is actually in Guild Wars 2, where you actually have to speak to people to make the group, where you make a team, you promote it, and you have a communication. It's not just a matching system. That I really hate, because I think it just encourages players to be anonymous, to be not nice with each other, and to be lazy. And by lazy, I mean people are just expecting to be spoon-fed and to be bring back by the hands to receive their free epic, and I don't like that at all.
Yeah. Hey, I see that they have the purple gear. He's good. Okay. I have to do nothing.
I'll throw one in that we said any other topics, and I'm going to moot this as a suggestion. Can epics please be epic? Can we not sneeze and get what's supposed to be the top level of gear?
Yeah.
Can they bring in gear score? Because I really like that.
Well,
Gear, you score 1. That's it.
I hope they make it that you see it visually very good, and also on the stats. You know that it matters. That it's not just like, oh, you got that too. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Oh, I will let you have one more say,
No, I
Miz.
was just going to say, sorry for the bad pun. I suddenly realised I of course know old Git as gear. Hence why
Yes,
the
that is my
comment.
other name.
Okay. Right. So, what I want to state, first off, thank you to everyone who has shown up for this particular town hall. I will reveal to those who are unaware that we will be having more coming up, and the format will be changing potentially slightly. So please, please, please keep in mind anything you want to have discussed. Look at getting together with your teams to join the next one so that you can have your say. Hopefully, we'll have more information that people can talk and debate about. And hopefully, as time progresses, more and more information will just keep drawing us closer and closer to the game. So I want to thank everybody who has showed up into the Twitch chat. I want to thank absolutely every one of you here who has taken the time to come share your opinions and showing yet again what a rich and diverse community we have. Not everyone has agreed on the different things they want to see. Not everybody has necessarily had an opinion one way or another about a topic. It shows that, again, designing a game is hard, but Wildstar seems to be doing it right, and their community is, as ever, stronger and stronger with each passing day. So I want to thank everybody for coming. Anyone want to say any final hellos or goodbyes?
Yeah, I want to thank you to have organized that and to have nicely moderated this discussion. It was well
Microphone
done.
activated.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you guys for coming
Yes, thank
and
you both.
participating.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank
thank
you
you.
for the
Absolutely.
opportunity.
The mods.
And Remember that if you have any topics that we have discussed that you really want to get into deeper, Wildstar Central, start your post, dig into the community. The best way to get this community strong is to participate and in a respectful manner. That's something we as a community really like to see is people who may not agree with us, but who are respectful in the way that they present their topics. And on that note, I want to thank you, Darth Laser, for being awesome, copying and pasting things back and forth, making changes to the stream as we went, and just simply say you can shut the stream off whenever you are ready.